Hey ladies and gentlemen, this is Miss Humbert here, and today we're going to be doing Unit 3, Note 6. So we're going to be multiplying polynomials, or monomials, by polynomials. Now remember that monomial means one term, polynomial means many terms. So let's quickly review our rules of exponents. First of all, multiplying like bases, you're going to add the exponents. Then when you do a power of a power, you're going to multiply the exponents. And last but not least, when you have something to the 0 power, your exponent is always 1. Now remember, when it's to the 0 power, it's just that exponent, or just the thing with the 0 power that's being raised, or that is equal to 1. Now let's review that distributive property. So the distributive property lets you multiply a sum by multiplying each of the terms separately and then adding the products. So what does that mean? That sounds really confusing, but all it is something, if you had something like this, and you took that 3 and you multiplied it into each term. That would be the distributive property. Okay, you've been using that for a lot now in algebra. So here's going to be your kind of process when you're using the distributive property. The first thing you're going to do is distribute each monomial to each term in the polynomial. So you want to make sure you multiply that monomial by each of your terms. Then you're going to multiply each of those pairs. You're going to combine like terms. Remember, for our answer to be in standard form for number 4, all our like terms need to be combined. Likewise, and also in order for it to be in standard form, your exponents have to be going in descending order. So next, let's go ahead and let's take a look at number 1. So here's the biggest thing. Think back to when we started multiplying monomials. We multiplied coefficients and added exponents. So that's what we're going to do when we distribute in this -2. We're going to multiply coefficients and add exponents. So I have -2 times 3, that's going to give me -6. And then I have x squared times x squared, that's going to be x to the 4th. Then I have -2 times -7, and that's going to give me 14, because we multiplied a negative times a negative, so it's going to be positive. Now I'm going to take x squared and multiply it by x to the 1st. Remember, if there's no exponent there, the exponent is x to the 1st. So we have x squared times x to the 1st, and that's going to become x cubed. Then I'm going to take -2 times 10, which is -20. Now there's no x with that 10 term, so the x term on this one is just going to be x squared. So last thing we need to check is that it's in standard form. So all our like terms are combined and our exponents are going in descending order. So this right here is our final answer. So let's take a look at number 5. So for number 5, we're taking and distributing that into each of those terms. 5 times -4 is -20. Then a squared times a squared, we're going to add those exponents and get a to the 4th. Next, 5 times 2 is 10. And then a squared times a to the 1st. Add those exponents and you get a cubed. 5 times -7 is -35. And then again, you want to make sure you take that a squared with. So now I notice that my exponents are going in descending order. All my like terms are combined. So that right there is my final answer for number 2. Next, let's take a look at number 3. So again, we're just taking and distributing. That's all we're doing. So we're taking that 6 and multiplying it by each term. 6 times 4 is 24. Y to the 1st times y squared. So this has a 1 on it. So remember, you need to add 1 to each exponent. So y squared times, or y to the 1st is y to the 3rd. 6 times -9 is going to give me -54. And then I'm multiplying y to the 1st times y to the 1st. So I want to add those exponents and get y squared. And then I have 6 times a -7, which is a -42. And then I want to make sure I tack on a y with it. So your exponents are going in descending order here. So this is your final answer because it's in standard form. Next, let's take a look at number 4. So for number 4, we want to take that -3x squared and distribute it into each thing. So -3 times 4 is going to give me a -12. X squared times x to the 1st. So when I have x squared times x to the 1st, I add those exponents and get x cubed. -3 times -8 is a positive 24. And then x squared times x squared is going to give me x to the 4th. Remember, you're multiplying coefficients and adding exponents. -3 times 2 is -6, and then you'll have x squared. So what I do notice now is that my exponents are not going in descending order, which means this answer is not in standard form. So I'm going to rewrite it out. My largest exponent is x to the fourth. So I'm going to start by writing out 24x to the fourth. Then negative 12x to the third, and then negative 6x squared. So this right here is your final answer for number 4. Let's continue moving forward. So for this one, let's take a look at a couple of things. So simplifying these expressions. So here's what we need to have a fully simplified expression. Okay, so you're going to distribute the monomial into each term in each polynomial. So sometimes you're given two separate polynomials. You only distribute that monomial into the parenthesis that follows. Then you're going to multiply like we did, combine like terms between the two polynomials, and lastly, again, you want to make sure that your answer is in standard form. You will lose points if your answer is not in standard form. So next, let's take a look at number 5. So for number 5, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take that 4 and I'm going to distribute it into each of those terms. I'm going to take that negative d and I'm going to distribute it into each of those terms. So 4 times 3 is 12, and then we have d squared. 4 times 5 is 20, and then we have a d. So in that second parenthesis, we're going to multiply a negative d. So we're going to add each of our exponents, and we're going to change the signs of everything, because it's kind of like this is a negative 1d. So negative 1d times d squared is going to be a negative d cubed when you add those exponents. Negative d times a negative 7d, well, that's going to become a positive 7 when you multiply the two negatives, and d times d is going to give us d squared. Then a negative d times 12, well, that's going to be a negative 12, and we want to make sure we tack on our d at the end of it. So now we want to combine our like terms. So we have negative d cubed, that's our largest exponent, so negative d cubed comes first. Next, I have 12d squared plus 7d squared. So I'm going to add 7 plus 12, and that's going to give me 19. Now, when I add d squared plus d squared, it's going to stay d squared. Remember, when you're combining like terms, you do not add the exponents. You only add the exponents when you are multiplying. Next, we have 20d minus 12d, and that's going to give us 8d. So this right here is your final answer for number 5. Next, let's take a look at number 6. So for number 6, again, we're going to distribute each into each parenthesis. Okay, so we're going to start by taking that 3 and distributing it into everything, and then that negative x and distribute it into everything. Remember that negative x is going to change the signs of everything. So now let's go ahead and distribute that 3. So 3 times 5 is 15, and then we have x squared. 3 times 2 is 6, and then we have x. 3 times negative 4 is negative 12. So now I'm done with that one right there. Now I'm taking that negative x and distributing it in. Negative x times 7x squared. First of all, that's going to become negative 7. X to the first times x squared. Add those exponents and you get x cubed. Negative x plus 2x, that's going to become negative 2. X times x is going to become x squared. Negative x times negative 3 is going to become positive 3, and then you want to make sure there's an x with it. So now we want to go through and we want to combine our like terms. So my largest exponent is x to the third. So that negative 7x to the third is going to come first. Then, once I've canceled that out, I have 15x squared plus or minus 2x squared. Well, that's going to give me 13x squared. And then once I've gotten rid of my x squared, I have 6x plus 3x. That's going to give me 9x. Last but not least is that constant coming down at the end, and that's going to be negative 12. So here's my final answer, again with my exponents going in descending order. Taking a look at number 7 and number 8, so we want to go through and distribute everything. So that's all we're doing. 3 times 2 is 6, and then t squared. 3 times a negative 4 is negative 12, and then t. 3 times a negative 15 is negative 45. And then 6 times 5 is 30, and then t to the first times t to the first is t squared. 6 times 2 is 12, and then you want to make sure you have that t with it. So again, let's go ahead and combine our like terms. So we have 6t squared plus 30t squared. So that's going to give us 36t squared. Our next highest exponent is negative 12t plus 12t. Well, those are going to cancel each other out to 0, so I'm not even going to have a t term. And last but not least needs to come my constant, which is negative 45. So 36t squared minus 45 is your final answer for number 7. Let's take a look at number 8. So for number 8, we're going to take and we're going to distribute each of those in. So we're going to distribute the x into the first one and the 2 into the second one. So x times 3x, x to the first times x to the first is going to give us x squared. X times 4 is going to give us 4x. 14 times x is, 2 times 7 is 14, and then x, and 2 times negative 3 is negative 6. So now we want to go through and we want to add our exponents. So we have 3x squared, and then 4x plus 14x is 18x, and then minus 6. So again, it has to be in standard form or you will lose some points. Let's go ahead and let's take a look at that word problem. So Greg pays a fee of $20 a month for local calls. So Greg has to pay $20 for his bill before he even makes any phone calls. Long distance rate are 6 cents a minute, so I'm going to write that as 0.06, and 5 cents a minute for out of state, so I'm going to write that as 0.05. Suppose Greg makes 300 minutes of long distance calls in January. M of those are in-state calls. So we have M in-state calls, and it's 6 cents for every minute we call in-state. So how do we figure out what we're going to do out of state? Well, it's 5 cents for my out of state. I know, though, that I have 300 total minutes. So the number of minutes is the number of minutes in state and the number of minutes out of state. So to get the number of minutes out of state, I'm going to take the total number of minutes and subtract the number of minutes that were in state. And now I'm just going to distribute. So then I get 20 plus 0.06 m plus 15 when you multiply 0.05 times 300 minus 0.05 m. Now I just need to combine like terms. 0.06 minus 0.05, I'm going to get 0.01 m. 20 plus 15 is 35. So if you know how many minutes you did in state, you can plug that in for m and you can get the total bill cost. Let's take a look at another problem really similar to this. So for a parking garage, you have to pay $30 per month. The B I'm just using to represent the bill. So we're starting off and we're paying $30 a month. 50 cents per daytime, 25 cents per nights and weekends. So total, we're going to do 47 hours. Each of those are night and weekends. Well, it's 25 cents for every hour on night and weekends. So 0.25 H, because H represents our number of hours on the nights and weekends. Now, what we want to do is figure out the number of daytime hours. So that's going to be 50 cents, and to get the number of daytime hours, we're going to take our total number of hours and subtract the amount of hours that were on the nights and weekends. So now we're going to simplify. I'm going to distribute that in, and I get 30 plus 0.25 H plus 0.50 times 47 is 23.5 and a negative 0.5 H. Again, I want to combine like terms. So 0.25 H minus 0.5 H is a negative 0.25 and then H. And then 30 plus 23.5 is going to give us 53.5. So this is our total for our bill. So that concludes your note for today. Please, please, please make sure you get that Schoology quiz taken. Thank you for listening.